You are tuned in to the Monday Night Carlo, Sports and Entertainment Sportscast. And now, without further ado, I give to you the one and only Carlo.
Hello everybody and welcome to Monday Night Carlo, the podcast that wrestles with pop culture. And that's exactly what we're going to do tonight, because we're going to talk wrestling, we're going to talk football, we're going to talk all sorts with this man. This man is called Ash Rose. He is the editor of Kick Magazine. He is the writer, author of WWE Kids Magazine, I believe. He is the presenter of Alive and Kicking, the 90s football podcast. And he is actually right here with me on the line right now. Ash, welcome to the podcast, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for that intro. It sounded like I get about a bit. It sounds like I've done too much already. Sounds like I'm a busy man. But yes, thank you for that. Good to be here. Good to be here.
You are a busy man, and thank you so much for taking time out to speak to me. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell the listeners a bit about you and what you do.
Well, as you said in the intro, mate, it's firstly and foremost, I'm editor of Kick Magazine, which is the UK's biggest selling monthly football magazine for kids. So I regularly kind of on the beat doing some football stuff, talking to big name footy stars in the Premier League and just doing kind of just fun features. You can kind of imagine sort of the match and shoot of kind of our era. It's kind of a monthly version of that. So you get to have fun with kind of not talking too much about the details of football, more the fun, the hero worship, like the kids, like these guys, they do in this day and age. So that's my kind of private memory kind of day job is what I do. But yes, as you said again, in the intro, I also freelance for WWE Kids Magazine, which means I get to indulge in my guilty pleasure of WWE, which is always brilliant. And yes, and also as a side project, I host the Alive and Kicking podcast, which is all about 90s football, which I'm very much is all close to my heart. It's what I grew up in. So we talk basically on a week basis. We've just literally recorded a podcast on USA 94, which was my favourite World Cup. So that'll be dropping tomorrow, which was great fun. We also been lucky enough to have some great guys to talk to from that era as well. We had Damo Hanakachi on the phone this week, and we've had some brilliant guests throughout it started at the beginning of the season, and it spawned actually from a book that I wrote basically on 90s football again, which is called Alive and Kicking. It's kind of a coffee table book that you can pick up now and then, and it's just a look back, nothing too heavy, just all the kind of nostalgia is the key word. It's one of my favourite words, and it's just a look back at kind of all the big moments from the 90s, the stickers, the figures, anything you can kind of throw, Predator football boots, TV shows. It's all covered in the book, and then we've kind of moved that on to a podcast. So yeah, check it out on iTunes. It's called Alive and Kicking. So yeah, that's kind of my kind of three main sort of pop fingers pies I've got in at the moment, and it's great to share it with you guys.
Well, let me tell you, man, just from you mentioning that, I mean, your podcast is where I first come in contact with you. I'm no disrespect to you, I haven't heard of your show or you before until I come across your podcast. And I actually fell in love with your podcast, man. It is great. It is that look back at the old sticker book era. It reminds me of being a kid again. And like you mentioned, Match and Kick Magazine and all that stuff when you were a kid. And it was just amazing to look back. And it must be amazing to do the podcast and speak to these guys as well, you know?
It is. It is close to my heart. I mean, I think, the 90s, as we say on the podcast, it is a decade that very much changed football.
Yes.
It's not a throwaway line. It really did. Like if you look at football from 99 and then look at back at 90, the contrast is so different. What with the Premier League, the Champions League, the Bosman ruling. So football as a whole completely changed. But then you also throw in that I always say 90s football is so much more fun than football. I mean, I love football today. It's my, it's my day job. It's my bread and butter. However, I think football was more fun in the 90s. And I think we kind of just celebrate that by looking back. And, the sticker books were more there. The World Cup seemed more kind of exotic. We didn't have the worldwide coverage that we have now. So seeing like a World Cup in America and hearing players that you'd never heard of before because there was nothing like Twitter or any of the coverage, the blanket coverage that you get on Sky now. The players just used to come out of nowhere. Like someone like Carlos Valderrama and that big hairdo that he used to have, you'd see him and just not know what the hell was going on because you'd never heard of this player before. So yeah, it's really fun to look back. And as I said, we've had some great guests on the show in the past, sort of since the start of the season. Mickey Quinn was brilliant. Paul Walsh told some great stories. Well, what I didn't realise is we asked him about Georgie Kincladze. I don't know if you remember, he played for Manchester City.
Yes.
Quite a sort of maverick player. And through my kind of nostalgic look back, he's someone I always thought was brilliant. We asked Paul Walsh about him, and he really didn't like playing with him. He didn't track back defensively, and it's kind of, you don't really realise that until you talk to these guys. And so he was good. Roy Evans told some great stories. Mark
Very
Crossley, he was the only person to save a penalty from Matt Letizia, which was great to hear. So yeah, I mean, it's just fun, as you say. It's good to look back on. I mean, I'm on the hunt for Roy Wegerle because he's my absolute. I'm a QPR fan myself, so he was my hero growing up. Although he was with QPR for a very short space of time. Again, he was quite exotic, being from South Africa and then playing for the US. So I have been in contact in email, but he's slightly reluctant to want to talk about his football career, which is gutting, because I would really like to get him on the podcast and just really talk to him about the QPR days. But yeah. We've had some good guests, and yeah, it is really fun. And hopefully, we'll go to the end of the season, and then we'll see if we can carry it on and share some more memories. We're doing video games in a couple of weeks, which also, again, opens up so many doors to classic video games like the original FIFA, the Football Manager, and then things like Sensible Soccer and things like that. So that will be talked about in a couple of weeks as well.
So let's start to talk about football itself. I mean, you say you're a QPR fan. What are your kind of biggest memories? Do you have childhood memories? What was your first game with QPR? Do you remember going with your dad, or maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's my dad's fault I'm a QPR fan. I actually grew up in the other side of London, sort of.
Nice.
In South East, so I should be a Charlton fan really, but my dad was from that way. He's from West London, from Shepherd's Bush. So yeah, I followed my dad. He took me to my first game in December '92. We played Everton. We won 4-2. Andy Sinton scored a hat-trick, and Everton had 2 players sent off. So it was like a completely... threw me in the deep end and got one of the most entertaining games of that era, I think. But, I soon realised that doesn't happen every week. But that team, of the early 90s and kind of the first sort of inaugural Premier League, you're looking at guys like Les Ferdinand and Andy Sinton, Ray Wilkins, Alan McDonald at the back, Bardsley and Wilson, who were great fullbacks. And they finished top London club that first season in the Premier League, above the likes of Arsenal and Chelsea and Tottenham. So at the time, choosing QPR to support seemed like a good idea. Just, after our relegation in '96, it all went a bit downhill from that. But, you're not in it for the glory. And, I think that team really, it shone to me as a kid. And I felt lucky to support QPR. And I think when you grow up in an area that no one else supports it's kind of, it becomes even your own even more, because it's your little, everyone around my school supported the big teams, or once Charlton got in the Premier League, they come out of the woodwork and became Charlton fans. But I think those are my earliest memories. And beating Man United at Old Trafford, that's one of my earliest memories as well. That was in New Year's Day 1992. We beat Man United 4-1 at Old Trafford, and Dennis Bailey got a hat-trick. And I think it's one of the, no one expected to do it. And I think Man United have only been beaten that badly twice in their whole history at Old Trafford. So that's a very, very memorable game from my sort of early 90s memory of Queen's Park Rangers.
I mean, it's funny that you bring that up, because I'm a Norwich City fan, and born and bred Norwich fan, and to me that is my club, But a lot of people that live around here, they'll support like a Man United or an Arsenal because they're the bigger club, obviously. But to me, you get so much more out of it, Ash, if you actually, like you say, you're behind your own team. When they do have the glory of beating the bigger teams or getting results you didn't expect, to me that's even more of a victory,
Yeah, I agree. And that was a great era for you guys as well. You look at that Norwich team of the same sort of era, the early 90s, the Premier League team, and the team that went to Munich as well. Jeremy obviously talks about that Jeremy Goss goal against Bayern Munich. I remember that very vividly. We talked about that earlier in the season on our podcast. We did a European Nights one. We had a Norwich guy on, talk very fondly about that. But yeah, that was a great team. And then you finished kind of, was it third in the first season of the Premier League, if I remember?
Third, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy to think, we say that, look at Leicester this season and everyone's so shocked. And again, I am. It's an absolute brilliant for football to see Leicester up there. I didn't think would happen. But in the early kind of Premier League, you kind of had those teams up there. You had your Norwiches, Aston Villa were a big team. QPR came fifth. And so, yeah, I mean, it used to happen more often in the early days of the Premier League. I mean, it's great to see Leicester up there at the moment because it's really refreshing.
Definitely. I was going to ask you about that. I mean, what do you think of today's football? And obviously, namely Leicester as well. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think they'll win the league?
I think every single sort of pundit and fan thinks that they probably won't end up winning the league because it's Leicester. I think we still can't really believe that it will happen. I hope they do. I really, really do. I think the result against Arsenal last time out could be a bit of a killer blow. Hopefully the break in between the two games might have done them some good. They are still 2 points clear, although Arsenal being probably out of the Champions League now means their focus will switch primarily on the league, so that might not be great for Leicester.
Yes.
But it's so good for football, though. I try to explain this to my wife, who is completely not into football whatsoever. And sometimes you just have to vent something. When something happens in football and the only person around is your wife, you just have to get this out. And I was trying to explain to her how unlikely it would have been if I said at the start of the season that Leicester would even be in the top four, let alone win the league. And the only thing I could really compare it to was someone from Coronation Street waking up tomorrow and winning an Oscar. That was kind of the comparison I was saying. It's so ridiculous and it's so brilliant at the same time, especially because it's Ranieri, because I was one of them. We do predictions in Kick magazine, and pre-season I said Leicester will go down. I thought Ranieri was a terrible appointment. I hold my hands up, but he did well. He's gone in there. He didn't change very much. I mean, him lifting the trophy at Stamford Bridge on the last day would be amazing for football. I mean, I'm a QPR fan, so, Chelsea aren't my favourite club, really, anyway. But to see Ranieri do it would be amazing. I think they might just come short, unfortunately. But to even qualify for the Champions League is such an achievement.
So, obviously, talking from football to the 90s from today, what do you think it is, Ash, that makes football so different today? Is it just the money, or is there more to that than that?
I think, unfortunately, money has got a lot to do with it. When the Premier League came in 1992, and then obviously the Champions League came what it came. Sky have got a hell of a lot to do with it. Sky changed the way we watch football. It changed the way money was coming into football. A lot of teams used to rely on gates and selling shirts for their income, but now it's completely, nearly sort of 90% the TV deals. You look at the last TV deal, you're looking in the billions of pounds now, which is why clubs like lower down the league are buying players like Dimitri Payet and spending a lot of money, and the gap is getting closer, and why we're seeing teams like Leicester and Tottenham doing as well as everyone else now. So I think that is, that you can't ignore the difference. In some ways it's brilliant because it means we have more blanket coverage of football now, and football, you can go anywhere in the world and watch a game now, and you can, if you flick through the channels, somewhere play football, as much as it's to my wife's detriment and I'm always watching it. But
I just think the thing is that with the 90s, obviously there was a lot more loyalty to the game than there is now. In the 90s, you had players that actually wanted to play for the shirt, wanted to play for their club so much. You could see it in their face. When you look back at the footage, you can't tell me, Ash, that those guys aren't passionate. And now I feel like a lot of these guys, that they just aren't passionate about the game. They're more passionate about what's going in their back pockets.
Yeah, there's a real disconnect, I think, which is where the bad side of the money's coming from players to fans. I think there's not, like you say, that passion in terms of it's more like a job in a way. Kind of, this is what I do for a living more than this is what I love to do. I'm lucky enough to be paid to be a footballer. I think they may start off like that, but I think that once you get in the game and the amount of money that you earn so quickly, I talk on the podcast. We talked to guys who started their kind of careers sort of early 90s, and they had to do the YTS. They had to clean the boots and clean the stands and things like that. That doesn't happen anymore. You got 16-year-olds at Chelsea on 3 sums a week driving around in Ferraris, and I think that's what changed. I don't think you should get that until you look at someone like Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who's really been on the periphery of Chelsea for a long time. He's a young lad. He's got massive potential.
Yes.
But he's already on a ridiculous contract. He's driving around in a ridiculous car. And I'm not singling out Chelsea. It happens at all clubs. No. It's just a shame. You think, the hard work that the guys in the 90s used to sort of come up the hard way, and it felt like they earned their spot in the first team. Whereas today, I think some of the kids that come through kind of think, oh yeah, if I do this, I'll make it and it'll be okay. So there is the money really has changed the way you wouldn't see players, for instance, sort of drinking with fans in pubs after the game, which used to happen in the 90s. And, to some extent, that's maybe too far. But I think some fans really do feel that disconnect between the players on the pitch and the punters in the stand. And it is a shame to see. And I think, I'm all for one to having local lads playing for the team as well. I mean, that's, highly unlikely in this day and age. But it is what it is. And you think with things like Twitter and Facebook would be more close because you can see more than ever into someone's life now. But I think it's even taken it further away when you look at Julian Lescott and his accidental tweet last weekend with the football and the expensive car after they lost 6-0 to Liverpool. It puts bad taste in fans' mouths, and it's a real shame.
It is a real shame. I mean, just talking about the 90s compared to today. Do you think there's anything else that kind of football misses from that era?
The Cup Winners' Cup. I think it misses that. I think the European competitions, I think too much emphasis on the Champions League. I think the Europa League is kind of treated like a horrible, distant little brother or a little cousin or something. Even, that Europa's not even a word for a start. I don't know where Europa came from. And the way they treat
that's kind of seen as like the Mickey Mouse Cup, I think.
Yeah, and it's just a shame because the old UEFA Cup and the Cup Winners' Cup had some great games in the 90s. The group stage in the Europa League is ridiculous. It should always be a knockout stage competition because I think the group stage makes it too many games and too much football, which is why you see teams spend all season trying to get into Europe. Then when they do, they play the kids because there's too many games. I think it does miss a kind of a different way of what we used to European football. The Cup Winners' Cup, when you had all the cup winners in one competition, really used to throw out some really random games because
that's right.
Back in them days, people used to win the FA Cup. It wasn't the same sort of conglomerate of teams, so you used to get really different kind of matchups in Europe then. So yeah, I'd say it misses that. The kits aren't as good. I'm a massive kit geek. I love football kits. They're all too boring these days, all too templated. Oh God, I'm sounding like an old man now. But I like the 90s garish kits.
I love the 92, 93 Norwich City kit.
Oh, they call it the bird poo kit, don't they?
Oh, it's amazing. I love that kit.
Yeah, I know. When I see those lists of the world, like the top 10 worst kits of all time, I love all of them. Like the Arsenal bruised banana. You had the whole city that literally looked like a tiger stripe one. Like you mentioned, the Norwich one. There was a few others like it. I mean, my all-time favourite football kit is the USA away kit from the '94 World Cup, which was like a Venom effect.
I remember that.
The start, I've got it hanging in my office, an actual replica of time, and you actually feel it. It's one of the thickest football kits I've ever felt. How they played in it in the Orlando Heat during that summer, I have no idea. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what I mean about football. It was a bit more fun in the 90s. Sometimes I think football has got a little bit too serious. Again, it is the money and kind of the short-termism of the game. I just felt more. We had more fun in the 90s when we were watching football, and that there were bigger personalities. You don't get so many characters in the game anymore. They're all too, very much media trained. I get that in my day job. When you go and do interviews, you can tell that what sort of interview is going to be interesting because they're all very well media trained, which, in certain instances they have to be, and I agree with. But it kind of at the same time taking a little bit of character out of people, and you had a lot of those. People like Gaza, and Eric Cantona, the Mavericks of that era. You don't really see that sort of player anymore.
I mean, if you're going to talk about kind of a dream podcast guest for your podcast, he's not around anymore. But I think Brian Clough. You think about an amazing interview. How good would that have been? It
would have been brilliant. Yeah, I mean, it's a shame Brian had. I mean, the 90s for him were kind of. Yes. Relegation kind of at the beginning, although they won the League Cup in the kind of, I think it was 90 and 91. So, but yeah, Brian Clough at any stage or any era would be brilliant to talk to. I think Paul Gascoigne would be a dream guest, but whether you can trust him to even turn up or say the right things, I'm not sure. Because to me, I think Paul Gascoigne was the 90s. I don't think you can go anywhere any time during that era, and he wasn't a massive part of whatever was going on, whether you're talking about Italian 90, him at Lazio, then Euro 96, and then how brilliant he was at Rangers. We did a Team of the Decade podcast actually the end of last year, and my guest, I got overruled actually by my guest, one being a Borough fan, which I should have thought through, seeing as Gaza had such a bad stint at Borough, but he didn't make the team in the 90s, which was scandalous. So I should have overruled my guests really, because for me Gaza was the 90s, and he's the kind of player I really enjoy watching.
That is very, very cool. I'm guessing that Euro 96 is a massive basis for your podcast as well, being also near with that one as well.
Oh, Euro 96, and we haven't done that podcast yet, mainly because I'm kind of gearing up to it, just because so many people.
Amazing.
It's hard to, unless you were around that summer, it's really hard to kind of describe the feeling around the country at the time. It was such a magical summer. It felt like it was sunny every day. It felt like it was the hottest summer we've ever had. Three Lions felt like it was number one for 6 weeks when it was only a couple of weeks, and the football was brilliant. We'd waited so long for that.
Let me tell you this one though, Ash. I was a kid when this was on. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I think I was around say 12, something like that. But my brother obviously was a huge football fan, and I wasn't really into football at the time. I'll fully admit this. But Euro 96 actually dragged me into loving football. That was that big of a tournament, and that was that. My whole family was that much into it that from that moment on, it was just literally football non-stop for me. That's how big it was for our family.
I think that's what happened to a lot of people. I think, that I say that, and, certain aspects of the 90s, a book like Fever Pitch, there were certain things that happened in the 90s that, kind of got more and more football more popular. Starting from 90 when the England team were very good then Euro 96 and the fever around the country. And because the team was so good,
yes.
They were brilliant, that team. We'd been through a very transitional period under Graham Taylor, where we didn't qualify for USA 94. It was still kind of the team at 90 had long retired got to 96. And it just all clicked into place. We had 2 years of friendlies because we were hosting Euro 96 and we weren't quite sure how that team would perform in the tournament. Alan Shearer didn't score for like 13 games prior to Euro 96. But once the tournament started, albeit the Switzerland game was a bit of a bore, but once that half time in Scotland game, once Gazza did what Gazza did, and we talk about goals in the 90s, that's got to be up there with the top 5 easily, because that's one of the most, not just for the occasion, but the skill and the cheek of it as well, to do it over his teammates as well. Absolutely brilliant. I feel Colin Hendry is still looking over his shoulder, finding where that ball was going to land. But yeah, and like I say, it's just hard to describe. It was a summer. It was just gutting that we didn't win it. Because we were the best team in it. We were Darren Anderton passed to Paul Gascoigne. I think he missed it by like a centimetre off his boot in extra time against Germany to win in that semi-final. And, Gareth Southgate was the fall guy, but he didn't need to be because he had a fantastic tournament. And it was just one of those things. It was but at the same time, it's so very English to have that brilliant summer, that brilliant team, and still not win it, and still have Germany come in at the end, win the tournament, and go home singing Three Lions. That just kind of sums up the England football team.
25, about 30, 37, half about 50, 60, 60, 70, 70, 80, 90, I'm 100% sure that if you watch Monday Night Carlo, you're going to be in for a treat. You're going to learn a lot of stuff, and thank you, and thank everyone. This is a ringleader.
So moving on from that, I do want to ask you about England today. I know it's kind of always rolling at the minute, but I just want to know kind of what your thoughts are about England. What can they do, Ash, to improve the team, in your opinion?
I'm getting more and more positive about the team as we get closer to the tournament. I mean, my big issue with it really, and issue is probably too harsh of a word, but Roy Hodgson will play his favourite team regardless of form and fitness.
Yes.
Now, I don't necessarily agree with that because, you earn the right to be in the England team. You don't just get fit, i.e. Theo Walcott and probably Danny Welbeck and Daniel Sturridge, and just walk back into the England team. You earn the right, like Harry Kane has, like Jamie Vardy has, like Danny Drinkwaters has. Hopefully he gets picked for the next squad. But yeah, so I know that he will probably play his favourites. And I can see the argument that if you've got a team in mind, that you want to play that team. I completely understand that. But if Jack Wilshere plays 2 games this season, he was probably going to be on the squad in the summer, which isn't right. So that's my biggest issue.
Tell me your 11, Ash. What would your 11 be?
Starting 11 for the first game. Joe Hart picks himself, doesn't he?
Yes.
Completely. I mean, Jack Butland's had a great season, but I think Joe Hart picks himself. Back 4, I suppose we're looking at Nathaniel Klein, probably. Still I think he's still holding on to that number 2 shirt. Smalling and Stones, I think Cahill is in there or thereabouts. I think I'd go with Cahill, just the experience factor, because John Stones will have his time. He's going to be England's centre-back going forward. So maybe Cahill and Smalling. Left-back's really interesting. There's a number of options we can go for. I'm a big fan of Leighton Baines, not had the best of season. Danny Rose, Ryan Bertrand. I think I'd give it to Baines just on the basis that I think he will deliver and he gives us the option of penalties and free kicks. I don't even want to know what formation to have. You've got to have Dele Alli in the middle.
Yes.
Without doubt. It's been
amazing,
the most improved player of the season. Few would even think he'd be in. He's the sort of player that, you like to see. He deserves his England chance because he's had a great season. Despite, it doesn't matter about his age. He's had a great season, deserves to be starting. He's the closest we've had to Steven Gerrard since he's retired. So I think he deserves to be in there.
Are you a fan? Are you a fan of the 2 up front or the 1 and 1 behind?
I'm old school. I would want 2 up front because...
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I've come from a 4-4-2, generation. I'm not saying we should play 4-4-2, but I think, it gives you more options. But then you have the Rooney question. Do you play? He will play, so you kind of have to put him in regardless if you think he should play or not.
I wouldn't play him up front myself. Personally, if that was me personally, I would play Rooney behind. But
yeah, behind Kane.
If that was me, I'm going to let you finish, obviously. But
yeah. So where am I? So I've got Dele Alli. you need a sitting midfielder at the moment, and that's where England lack, because Jordan Henderson's not had a great season. I think he will play. For me, Johnny Drinkwater has he's not stepped wrong. I know it's a big call to stick him in for a tournament, but if he does well in the friendlies, why not? He's done that job for Leicester all season. He's looked good. He's come from Man United academy, so he's known. He's not someone who's come from nowhere. He knows his stuff. He's worked his way up, and he's done very well. I'm gonna go 4-4-2 just because it's my team. So if I have Ali and Drinkwater in the middle, I'll have Sterling on the left because I think he gives that outlet, and I think he's still quite a raw player. Learned his trade at QPR, of course, but I think he will give that explosiveness that England kind of need, and we've kind of really been lacking over the sort of last few years. On the right, I've got a real quandary of this one because I really like Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, but I think he's got a problem with staying fit. But if he is fit, I like him a lot, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. Again,
you play the Ox.
I get ahead. I think he offers more than Theo Walcott. I think he gives more than Adam Lallana. He could kind of shift on there as well.
Very good player.
So I would go with the Ox if fit, and then up front, I'm going to take Rooney out of it. I think Rooney would play, and I think he probably, he's our captain. So I'm going to cheat and say if Rooney and Kane would be my kind of first choice, but I'd love to see Vardy and Kane at the same time. I think Vardy and Kane, with Rooney being out the next friendly, it would be great to see Roy Hodgson play them together up front.
Can you imagine that? Can you even imagine Kane and Vardy up front with Rooney
behind? They offer so much together as a partnership. Kane can hold up the ball. He's great in the air. He could do a lot
behind that as well. That would be amazing.
That would be. That would be my ideal kind of. But I think we might leave ourselves open without a real defensive midfielder, because I think that's the only thing England don't really have at the moment.
That's true.
A real defensive midfielder. Dele Alli can be that, but then I think he'd take a lot from his game by making him defensive, a lot like Steven Gerrard used to do back in the Lampard-Gerrard quandrum we used to have back in the sort of 2000s. Vardy and Kane would be brilliant as a partnership because each one has attributes that the other doesn't have.
Exactly, yeah.
It's very much an old school partnership that you don't really see anymore, on paper that you really think that would click. When you're on the pitch, it may not happen. But I'm looking forward to seeing, because Vardy, he's not had the chance to play up front for England. Every time he's played, he's always shunted on the left because he's got a bit of pace. So I think he deserves his chance to play up front.
What I think? I think it reminds me, it gives me shades of like Owen and Shearer up front as well. That kind of partnership,
Yeah, no, you're not far wrong there. Yeah, because Vardy's pace as well. He's explosive pace. It's something England have really lacked, probably since Michael Owen retired. That kind of on the break. Sterling showed glimpses of it in the last World Cup, but he was very much. I'm saying he's raw now, but we're talking 2 years ago, so he's got more experience since then. So I think pace is going to be a big asset in our team, and I think that will hurt players. And I think Jamie Vardy, he's not going to be a stranger to these European teams, but he's not someone that they're completely aware of as well. So he becomes kind of a secret weapon for England because they're expecting Rooney, they're expecting Kane. They would, these European teams would have heard of Jamie Vardy and what he's done this season, but I don't think they'll quite know just what they're in for and the type of character Jamie Vardy is as well.
So before I move the interview away from football, I just want to know, what was it for you, Ash, that inspired you to be a part of what you do? What got you into media? I think I always wanted to, as a young boy, I think we all did. We wanted to be footballers, didn't we? I think that's the first thing you want to do. Once you get into football, all you want to do is play it. Unfortunately, I'm terrible. As once said by a goalkeeping coach, I've got all the coordination of a cucumber. So, and as soon as I knew that, you kind of know as a young age that you're probably not going to be good enough to make it because you have to have that in your locker before you even start thinking about being a footballer. Yeah. You look for other avenues, and I was always interested in magazines as a kid. I was obsessed by magazines as a kid. I used to collect them all, like I mentioned earlier, Match and Shoot, but there was loads at the time, not just football as well. Wrestling magazines, computer game magazines, film magazines. I just used to love to go, like going into Smith's was like amazing to me. Like you talk about Kid in a Sweet Shop, that was me. Like I hate the way the magazines have changed over the years. I like the physical product. I'm not down with the tablet versions. And it was kind of a natural kind of progression for me. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to write about football. Never really interested in newspaper writing, match reports and things like that. That was never really where I wanted to go. It was always feature writing. I always liked kind of doing interviews and writing kind of lists and features like that. So, I started in media sales because it's writing about football. I'm not the only one who wants to do it. It's a very hard industry to get into even now. So I did start in media sales, and then got a lucky break in terms of when I started at Kick magazine, I organised the competitions
So in
Okay.
terms, that kind of was, my sales background kind of sort of migrated into kind of selling competitions for the magazine. But when I got to Kick magazine, it'd only been going, I think it'd been going 6 or 7 issues at that time. And although they'd done quite well, they hadn't got anyone in the team that knew very much about football. They'd been getting by with a few freelancers.
Right.
And so I was quite lucky, being the kind of geeky stato kid that I was about football. My knowledge then helped me kind of progress on from being just competitions to being a staff writer and eventually now editor. So it's kind of, it's difficult. I mean, there are so many more options available now to people who want to write about football than there was when I was a kid. The internet was very much in its infancy at that time. So, I mean, blogging and vlogging wasn't a thing when I was growing up and doing it. So there are much more opportunities now for people to write. And it's great. I always like to see different sort of views and the new magazines coming out. So, yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to get into, but once there's more opportunity to do it now.
So was it while you were doing that you kind of became a broadcaster as well? Where did the broadcasting start for you at?
To be honest, it came a bit like, it's always been in me, because when I did media studies at college and uni, that side of me was always there. I think I got voted like the most likely to be a kids TV presenter or something like that, some stupid kind of gimmick in the yearbook or something like that. And to be honest, because I was focusing so much on the writing for so long, it kind of took a back seat. And then when I kind of became editor of Kick, and because I worked from home, my time became more flexible in terms of what I could do. So I just started looking for other avenues and things to do. So, I wrote a couple of books, and now we're doing the podcast. I present kind of we've got, for our YouTube channel or our website, if we do an interview, we do a little video. So we call Kick Mag TV. So we do little videos on there. And any opportunity now to do some broadcasting, that's kind of where I would like to go into to see my career kind of venture into next. That's the area I'm very much interested in at the moment. So for me, it feels quite new, even though I'm trailing behind some people that are probably a lot younger than me. It's kind of a very new venture, and I'm really enjoying the kind of different kind of aspect to it.
Well, let me tell you, man, I absolutely love podcasting. That's something that I've done just over the last couple of years, but I'm like you in so many ways. I've had so many friends say to me that that's something that I should do, and I just thought to myself, well, you know what, I am actually going to do it. And also the next subject, obviously being wrestling, I want to discuss with you is why I become interested in media and broadcasting. Because so many wrestling commentators inspired me to want to do my own show, my own product, and wrestling is something that grabbed me as a very young age, even before football. So I know you're a wrestling fan as well, Ash. So how did your love of wrestling begin for you?
Well, before I go, I mean, must say just about podcasts, they are a brilliant way for people to do exactly what we're doing. And they are a great new medium. They kind of went away, and now I think they're really making a comeback again. And it's great to see because, there's so many out there on so many different subjects, and they're so easy to do and present. And it gives people an opportunity to express opinion, and it's fantastic. I mean, I walk the dog, and all I do is listen to podcasts. It's the perfect walking the dog tool because you just have to zone off, and your podcast is brilliant. I would shout out to a couple of others I really enjoy. The QPR one personally, wrestling wise, Gorilla Position is a fantastic podcast with James Delo.
I've interviewed James Delo. He's a really nice guy. Yeah, as well.
Top bloke. Yeah, know James really well. Top bloke. Jericho does some great ones. I mean, I like Stone Colds, but I care less about the ranch than I do about the so I kind of zone out a lot of Stone Cold when he talks about being, on his ranch doing his stuff. But when you get to the meat of the wrestling, it is great. And there are so many out there, and it's a great outlet for people. But yeah, going to your question about the wrestling, I'm like you. I got into it very much at the same time as I did football. My earliest memory, my nan, she was ahead of the times, bless her. She got Sky or whatever it's called at the time, cable, way before my mum and dad did.
Yes.
And I remember being at her house, sitting in her spare room where she had a box in there, flicking through the channels, and I came across Primetime Wrestling with Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan. And I think the set used to have kind of loads of action figures on it.
That's right.
Yeah, again, something else that I'm completely geeky about is action figures. My office is full of pop vinyl figures at the moment, which drives my wife mad. So that was the first thing that caught my attention. But then what it was all about, we're talking now probably the first pay-per-view I remember would have been SummerSlam 1990, which was Hogan, Earthquake and Warrior, Rick Rude.
That's right.
I actually watched it back the other day because I hadn't watched it for years on the network, and it was great to relive those memories. So yeah, that's kind of, and once I'd seen it then, my family soon got cable TV just after my nan, and then at the time you watched WWE Superstars, which it was then before the golden age of then came obviously much later Monday Night Raw, and then the golden age of the Attitude Era. But yeah, it was very much in the kind of early 90s. Survivor Series 90 is one I really, really, really remember. It's one of my favourite pay-per-views still.
It's really, really weird that you bring that story up as a kid, because I've done exactly the same thing, man. And I'm not even disagreeing with you. I did exactly the same thing. I was sitting around a friend's house, and that was back in the day when WWE pay-per-views, I think, were on Sky Movies.
Yeah, they were
on Sky Movies.
Yeah.
And we were sitting there as kids, eating way too much sweets and way too much sugar going through the body. You know what it's like. Yeah. And basically, we were flicking around, and I literally came across the moment where Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior were in the ring at WrestleMania 6.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that was my first. Can you imagine me as a kid seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, the Ultimate Warrior. I mean, Hulk Hogan obviously defined the era, defined the history as it was. But for me, the Ultimate Warrior. I mean, as a kid, not knowing what about it, you look at the guy. First instant as a kid, he's massive. He's got these tassels, the face paint, the colours. You just wanted to know what the hell this guy was about. And then once you watched it a few weeks, you realise who Hogan is and how brilliant he was in that era. And then, all the surrounding players like the Macho Man, and I was a big Mr. Perfect fan. Despite him being a heel, I just loved his gimmick. Legion of Doom. I mean, my favourite tag team still of all time are the Rockers. Absolutely loved the Rockers. Legends. Shout out to Marty Jannetty. Always gets a Raw deal. Damn you, Shawn Michaels, as brilliant as you are.
That damn barbershop window.
Yeah, I still hurts. I still see that. When I hear their music now, the boom, 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 boom. Oh, brilliant. Love the Rockers doing it way before any of the Hardy Boys were doing those aerial antics. But yeah, the rock and roll wrestling era they call it, don't know, I suppose. But it really, that was the first boom period, I suppose, in this country as well. I remember going to see like UK Rampage in the early 90s.
That's right.
The London Docklands, I think it was at the time. Before I don't know if that's even there anymore, is it? I don't know. I can't remember. But
no, I don't think so.
So I saw that, and the British Bulldog, of course, he was the hometown hero, and then SummerSlam '92 at Wembley Stadium, which unbelievably is still only the last pay-per-view to be held in these shores, despite the fan base it has here. But I was there. I think everyone who was of that era tried to get a ticket. I was lucky enough to get one, and to be in that stadium to see Bulldog and Hart in the main event, and for Bulldog to win it. I mean, it was an amazing experience. And I really do hope we get, even it's a B pay-per-view, back at Wembley one day, because I think it would be amazing. We have to put up with the time difference 12 months a year. I'm sure America could do it for one occasion.
I'm pretty sure they did it recently for NXT.
Exactly.
I know they had NXT TakeOver, and that was a huge hit.
Yeah, I'm hoping that may be a prelude to maybe a pay-per-view over here, because it's about time. The fan base is big enough. We can keep off Twitter if we don't want to watch it live for an afternoon, and then watch it the next day if we have to. So I'm sure America could do it. We're not asking for WrestleMania. That would be amazing. But even one of the, maybe a SummerSlam again, or even one of the B pay-per-views like Extreme Rules, it'd be brilliant. Won't be as brilliant as SummerSlam '92. I'm sure it won't be as much as mine. As we all think, nostalgia is always better when we look back. But yeah, that was a great pay-per-view.
So just tell me this: you're as geeky as me, in as much as you have a favourite pay-per-view. Because my favourite pay-per-view, not just for '92, but my favourite pay-per-view actually is SummerSlam, just because I love the history of SummerSlam. Mm-hmm. And how about you? What is your all-time favourite pay-per-view?
I like Survivor Series. I used to love the idea.
Oh, the 5-mans.
Yeah, the teams. I mean, I think back in them days, you didn't obviously now on Raw, because there's so much more television and so much more hours to fill. You get a lot of 6-man tags, a lot of 8-man tags, or even just normal tags. You didn't get that back then. So to see these teams put together used to fascinate me. And then the feuds used to kind of intertwine between each other, and new feuds used to start. I hate it when WWE do it these days and there's no traditional Survivor Series matches. It really, really annoys me, because that's the uniqueness of the pay-per-view. It's brilliant. I remember my favourite Survivor Series team would have been the Warriors was that 90?
Oh, yes.
And you had Ultimate Warrior, the Texas Tornado, and the Legion of Doom. I mean, that is a team. That is a stellar team.
And being genuinely scared at the debut of The Undertaker.
Yeah, I mean, who the hell was that guy? When he came out, that was brilliant. Obviously, things like that in these days are spoiled by Twitter and in social media. But back then, no one knew that was mean Mark Calloway from WCW. That was, that is The Undertaker with Brother Love as well at the time, not even Paul Bearer. Amazing. Survivor Series 90 was brilliant, but again, there's so many moments of Survivor Series history that you can go look back on, that it's especially involving the teams, that were just brilliant. And I wish they would. I know they always kind of throw one out, maybe at the start of the pay-per-view or even on the kickoff show nowadays. But I think if they really built around that as a main event with, short-term booking these days doesn't happen. But I love that pay-per-view.
You're tuned into Monday Night Carlo, the sports pop culture podcast, available on iTunes, Spreaker, and Stitcher Radio. So why not hit that subscribe button now? Monday Night Carlo, where pop culture fun lives.
I think, in essence, Ash, what it really is I think the WWE need to take a step backwards. I think they need to cut the pay-per-views down, and I think they need to build the apprehension. They need to build the matches more, because they just don't do that anymore. They have way too many pay-per-views. They need to halve that to around 6, don't you think?
Yeah, it would be one way to really flesh out storylines. I think sometimes we're guilty of quick booking, and they're not you don't see the feud that you'd want to see kind of culminate in certain ways. So yeah, I think we've got 6 weeks build now to WrestleMania, which is kind of perfect. That's kind of what you need. What the things that happened on Raw on Monday gives you a good build to matches that happen at WrestleMania. That's, kind of having like 3 weeks to build to a pay-per-view is ridiculous, because you're not going to get anything out of that other than the rematch to what happened last month. So yeah, I agree. I think they could slim them down, the pay-per-views, and also stop doing the themed ones. Like, no one needs to see a Hell in a Cell themed pay-per-view.
No. And another thing is, as well, you mentioned that, I got to bring this up. The one thing that really irks me is the Money in the Bank pay-per-view, because isn't that like what everybody loved at WrestleMania, the Money in the Bank match?
Yeah. I think partly that's what it's guilty of its own success, isn't it? Money in the Bank, that it was so popular at WrestleMania that it was good enough to turn into a pay-per-view. But to me, it deserves to be at Mania. It's a way of getting more people on the card at Mania as well, because now there usually is a big multi-man match regardless of being Money in the Bank, because they want to get everyone on the card. I expect there'll be one this year, probably for something to do with the US title, most likely. So I don't know why they just kept Money in the Bank as a traditional kind of WrestleMania event. It's better than the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, because it doesn't mean anything. It's just a way to get a load of people on the card. It doesn't, it's a big trophy at the end of the day. I mean, what have Cesaro and Big Show done with it since?
It's just basically a storyline at the end of the day. Wasted.
And if they do it this year, Braun Strowman will probably win it, just because he's the big guy of the moment they want to give a push to. A few weeks ago they were talking of him taking on Lesnar, but they've kind of called on that idea now. So yeah, I would bring back Money in the Bank. I really think it's a good WrestleMania. Needs to be the best pay-per-view it should be. It's definitely it's the granddaddy of them all, as they used to call it. So they should be trying to pull out all the stops, and Money in the Bank is one of them. And that frees up another month not to do a pay-per-view. And again, TLC, do we need a pay-per-view that's themed around that? These matches should just happen organically, not be forced into. A couple of years ago, we had was it a chairs match? No, a stairs match.
That's right.
Was the worst one. Come on. Where did that come from? I love WWE, and there are too many people, especially on the internet, that moan about it, but stairs match was a very bizarre one.
I think Ash, that's different for us though, because we moan about the product, but not in a negative way. We moan because as a fan, from our kind of gut, we want the WWE to be the best that it can be, and I think that sometimes they just don't feel they get it anymore. Maybe they've like done the product so long, and like especially with Vince, I think that if he's got something set in stone in his head, he won't have anyone sway him on it.
No, and I think sometimes that Vince likes to fool the audience a little bit, which I get. For unpredictability is the best thing wrestling can do, and it's really hard to do in today's age. Monday night, seeing Shane McMahon come back, brilliant, because no one expected that to happen. It got the pop. It's nothing better than watching WWE and seeing a crowd pop like they weren't expecting something.
That Monday with Shane, I legitimately got goosebumps. I watched it blind. I didn't know he was going to turn up.
Me neither.
And it was just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and because Shane's brilliant.
He is brilliant.
He's the best McMahon. As soon as you hear, "Here comes the money,"
brilliant on the mic.
Brilliant on the mic. He's been sorely missed, and it's moments like that, like when the Dudley Boys came back earlier in the year, last year. I think it was just after SummerSlam, wasn't it? No one knew they were coming back, And the pop they got is brilliant, and that's what you want to hear. Unpredictability is the key, but I think sometimes Vince tries to swerve fans a bit too much, and it doesn't. And then storylines don't actually make sense, which is where the holes begin to appear. And then obviously he's very much guilty of pushing one guy he really believes in, no matter what. And I've got nothing against Roman Reigns. I think Roman Reigns has the potential to be brilliant. Unfortunately, his character hasn't been given time to breathe or kind of associate himself with the audience, and therefore he's getting the reaction like he did on Monday night. And if they're not careful, he's going to get booed out of the building with 100,000 people at the biggest pay-per-view of the year.
I really don't know how or why they kind of let this information come out to the masses, because I just think that once everyone knows that, say, Roman Reigns is Vince's golden boy, everyone's going to set upon Roman Reigns to hate him,
Yeah, and it's not fair on Roman Reigns. He didn't choose to be Vince's golden boy, and he's a very good, he's got a lot on his arsenal. I think he's not the finished article by any means, but he's a big guy, he's an intimidating guy, he can improve on the mic, but he's got a good rings, he's got a good moveset, he's got a good finisher, he's got a good look. He has got that potential, but to be forced upon you, like it happened last year, we got and you'd think they'd learn. I think the ending kind of saved it because you had Seth Rollins do the cash in. This year, I dread to think what's going to happen, because you saw what happened on Monday night. They were cheering for the heel Triple H, who was, beating 10 shades of whatever out of Roman Reigns, and they were saying one more time. That's not really the reaction you kind of want.
That's not what they were going for,
The next big star is that he's potentially going to be billed as. I think we all wanted Daniel Bryan to be that, but Vince McMahon didn't want that, and I find it awkward for Roman Reigns, because it's just not his fault, and I don't know why they've kind of gone down this road for so long, expecting it to change when they haven't really helped his character to help it change. When he went mental at Triple H after one of the pay-per-views towards the end of the year, that's the Roman Reigns we should be seeing. The aggressive, kind of doesn't really talk a lot, a little tiny bit like Goldberg, where he's all just about an ass-kicking machine, that type of kind of guy, whereas he's kind of not been given that role. And it's just not fair on the guy, and I hope it changes, but I can't see the main event WrestleMania going very well for Roman.
Just to switch gears, I want to talk briefly about Daniel Bryan. I was never... I love Daniel, but I'm not the biggest fan of Daniel, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel actually genuinely gutted for the guy, because he did look very emotional and very, very obviously distraught about the whole situation,
He did, yeah. I'm a little bit like you. I loved watching the rise of Daniel Bryan throughout the WrestleMania 30 build. I think we'll all remember when he had the Yes takeover of Raw. That was a fantastic night, a great visual to look back on. It's things like that make Monday Night Raw Night Raw. And it was emotional because what the guy did, and it's very rare, and you haven't really seen since the days of the Attitude Era, is he connected so well with the crowd that the crowd kind of got him to the main event of WrestleMania. That was set for Batista. Batista was going to be, that was his comeback moment from all those years out, and the crowd rejected him. They rejected him in the Rumble. They rejected him in the main event. They wanted Daniel Bryan, and I know a lot of that stems from being the internet darling and on the independent scene, but at the bottom of it all, Daniel Bryan was a fantastic wrestler who came to the WWE with a fantastic character that it evolved from being that annoying heel as he was at the beginning to being the brilliant comedy tag team with Kane. The best thing Kane's probably ever done, especially in the last decade. I think Kane's way stale, but that, Team Hell No was absolutely fantastic.
Brilliant, yeah.
And it made him into a brilliant, brilliant face once, the turn was made, and the Yes movement. The Yes thing, that he got cheers as big as you used to see Stone Cold and The Rock get back in the days. And not even the conglomerate that is John Cena. And I know his reactions are obviously indifferent, but even before everyone started shouting Cena sucks and he was the man, the night he got drafted to Raw, for instance, even him at that point would never, ever got the reaction that Daniel Bryan was getting in that build to WrestleMania 30, which makes it even more of a shame to see. I mean, obviously, he has to do it. There's no, when concussions are involved, that's, he's made the right decision, and it's unfortunate, the same way Edge had to. A few years ago for his health. So it's disappointing, but it was such an emotional moment, a brilliant farewell speech. He was still always with wrestling. There's 1% of you thinking, is this a work? But it clearly wasn't. The tears were real, and it'll be I hope he's on television. I hope somehow they kind of get him a role, not full time, but he comes back every now and then, because he's such a genuine guy who has charisma without even really knowing it. And that's kind of the best kind of charisma to have, I think.
I think another thing that kind of hurts the WWE is the believability of the product, because I grew up in an era of listen to my favourite commentator of all time, Gorilla Monsoon, who I think is amazing. I mean, people speak about Jim Ross. I love Jim Ross, but I think Gorilla Monsoon was the next level for me. Him and Jesse Ventura, or him with Bobby the Brain Heenan, were amazing. But
Yeah.
they spoke about the product, and JR spoke about the product as if it was real, you know. And they didn't kind of insult the wrestling fan listening to it. But now I think it's almost like Michael Cole and JBL. They don't want to admit that's real because, or, you know, say that they're pretty much admitting to you it's fake every week because they don't want to have egg on their face.
Yeah, I've got a lot of issues with the commentary team. Again, I don't like to moan about the product, but I've never been the biggest Michael Cole fan. I think he's improved over the last sort of 5 years, and he's become a better play-by-play. But he, you know, of my era, he's probably the worst we've ever had.
He was so annoying at Fastlane as well, Ash. I mean, me and my cousin were watching it Monday night, and he was just talking so fast and so loud you couldn't hear anything else.
Yeah. And JBL does the fact that he has to reference every random thing that he's found on the internet that week squeezed into a Monday night. I just don't understand what he's offering sometimes, which is a real shame because when JBL started, he was a real breath of fresh air actually, and I just think he's merged into something that's just not helping the commentary team. Brian Saxton's very green at the moment, not really offering anything. Go over to SmackDown, Mauro Romano. He's the one. He's the guy that, you know, you listen to him, he sounds enthusiastic.
So good.
Yeah, he sounds like he's made for the job. He play-by-play like a play-by-play should do, like the Monsoons, like you know, I was a big fan of Tony Schiavone back in the WCW days.
Yes,
a guy like him, Jim Ross, he's very good, and I hope, you know, there's very much talk at the moment of the brand extension happening, and if there is, then SmackDown would have the better commentary team. You know, Jerry Lawler was long out the door before they turned him fully fledged heel again, and he's much better as a heel, and you know, it just gives him something else to play with. So yeah, I agree with you, and I was a big fan of Monsoon. He's very much, you know, the Monsoon Heenan era it's so nostalgic, so brilliant. Jim Ross goes without saying, you know, big matches wouldn't be big matches without Jim Ross' commentary. Some of the big ones, some of his lines, especially the big Hell in a Cell, Mankind, Undertaker matches and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I was a big WCW fan in the Monday Night Wars. I was actually, if I was honest, I was edging on the WCW side. So Tony Schiavone for me was a very underrated commentator. And another guy. I mean, I know he was at WWE in the early 90s, but again, he was someone who was great in the day.
I mean, that's very sad how kind of Bobby Heenan's turned out now, but he's such an icon back in the 90s. I mean, the ratings for the WWE or WWF at the time, a lot of those ratings were just to watch Bobby the Brain Heenan.
And he's such a clever and witted man. You know, the things he used to come out with were just light years ahead of the, you know, kind of probably the demographic watching, especially the kids watching. He used to say things that we, as kind of, you know, 10, 11-year-olds would never get. And then you'd watch it back now and think he's even more hilarious because he was such a clever and funny guy, Bobby Heenan, throughout his tenure, both at WWE and WCW. So yeah, you know, it's very sad to what's happened in his later life, but he will be remembered for the right reasons of being a fantastic sort of co-commentator, and his relationship not just with Gorilla Monsoon but with Mean Gene as well is really fondly remembered. It's very much of that time. I don't think it would work in today's kind of WWE, but it was very much of that time, and it was brilliant for that era.
I don't know what it is about Bobby as well. When I think of Bobby, I always think of Andre the Giant. I always think of that team.
Well, it was the whole Heenan family, you know.
That's right.
The Weasel chants and stuff. He used to draw heat like no other manager used to. He was brilliant. You know, as I said earlier, I was a big Mr. Perfect fan, and he was part of that whole aspect of Mr. Perfect's character. His stuff with Ric Flair when Ric Flair won the 92 Rumble. I mean, that was brilliant. We all hated Ric Flair because at the time we were all staunch WWF fans, and this guy had just come over and won our world title. We didn't like it. You know, we wanted Warrior to win. We wanted Hogan to win. We wanted whoever else to win. You know, that Rumble was probably the most star-studded Rumble there's ever been in 1992. But it was Ric Flair, who came in and did it. So, you know, now we look back and we think Flair was one of the best ever, but at the time, you know, he was such a brilliant heel that everybody hated him.
So who do you consider your best ever? Have you got like an ultimate favorite from wrestling? Is it?
It's kind of split in eras, don't you?
Yes,
I think, really, because like growing up, as I said, I was a big Perfect fan, Warrior. I had a really random phase of Sid Justice when he came in. I was a really big random fan with him. If you had to put a gun to my head and say best ever, it has to be The Rock. I mean,
really?
Yeah, I know, you know, as a technical wrestler, he's not going to be up there with the Shawn Michaels and the Bret Harts of this world. but for pure entertainment, which is what I turn in for WWE to do, and WWF used to entertain me both in and outside the ring. I can't remember a time when there was a Rock segment and he didn't do that. He's the ultimate big match player, big game player. The stuff he used, especially in the early 2000s stuff, the kind of white shirt, just bring it era, as I like to call it. He was hilarious. It was the things he was coming out with on a weekly basis were just brilliant. And he had that, as soon as he turned heel, again, Survivor Series, was it 99 Deadly Games? Was that one? He just had it. He just has that charisma. You can't buy it. You can't teach it. And when he came back the other week, he just blows people out of the water. And his mic skills, he's just, and the fact that he's gone on to be probably the biggest movie star in the world right now, especially from a financial point of view, just shows what charisma is inside that man. And he put on great matches. My favourite Raw moment probably of all time was when him and Hogan, pretty much faced off and decided they were going to fight at WrestleMania.
That was awesome.
Maybe
they
you should.
They were just literally looking back and forth at each other in the crowd as well.
Yeah, because that was a match at the time you never thought you would see, and the way it came together with The Rock, for me, he is kind of my best ever. Although I must special mention to Sting as well, because as I said, I was a big WCW fan as well, and that whole NWO angle, which it goes without saying how brilliant the NWO angle was originally. He was obviously the saviour. Loved Bleach Blonde Sting before that, but the Crow Sting was such the vigilante thing, against one and all. It was just brilliant storytelling that, it's very rare. You get everything fell into place at the exact right time. He was the guy, he was WCW guy, and he was just, whatever he did for WCW and in TNA, his work in TNA can't be disregarded. He was brilliant. Especially the Joker Sting later on, because, at that point you didn't expect Sting to really evolve because he'd done all he'd done, but he did it then. His WWE days, I don't like what happened at WrestleMania last year. I don't like the way it went down. I don't really think it made sense. It was amazing to see him at WrestleMania, and it'd be great to see him in the Hall of Fame as well. I hope there's one more match in him. I dread to think there might not be after the match with Rollins the end of last year. But if I had to go with two, I would go The Rock and Sting.
I think there's so many listeners that are probably sick of me saying this because I've seen it. I've been asked it and said it so many times. But my ultimate favorite wrestler is Stone Cold Steve Austin, but not just because of the Stone Cold era, but I love Steve from WCW when he was Stunning Steve. Tag team with Brian Pillman, the Hollywood Blondes are amazing as well. But I, as a wrestling fan, have never been connected with as much as when Steve Austin was in the WWF, because I think I just started work at the time and I really didn't like my boss. And to me, it was just an outlet for me. Like, I was back in the kind of my teen era where everyone was a bit angsty and a bit, angry with yourself and angry with the world. So to me, this guy coming along and cussing off his boss and flicking his fingers up at his boss, to me was just amazing. But the way that Steve delivered it was in a way that was so believable as well.
It was. I mean, the Stone Cold character was. It just was right in so many ways. It was so much in the zeitgeist of the era. Stone Cold. It was the right time, the right guy, the right moment. Vince McMahon was the brilliant foil, because not was he just a boss, he was the world's worst boss, and he was, Stone Cold. You talk about greatest ever, Stone Cold is within a shout to be the I always say no Hogan, no wrestling, really, because of what he did in the very beginning. But without Austin, I think we would have, WWE would have gone down a very different route and probably nowhere near as popular as he is now. He really kind of gave that injection into the industry that was needed at the time, something different, kickstarted the Attitude Era, made the way for guys like The Rock. There's no Austin, no Rock, really.
I would even dare to say, though, Ash, this, without Austin, there would probably be no WWE, because at the time they were suffering big time. Yeah,
it's a great point, because he really did. He changed the game. He really did. And as his battles with The Rock over those 3 WrestleManias, legendary, one of the greatest rivalries the industry's ever seen. So he changed. Yeah, he completely. You look at it's eras, isn't it? You look at Hogan, Austin, and then Cena. Each one of them kind of own their own era, whether you like them or not. I mean, I know Cena is more of a debatable one, but they owned that era and they changed the way we all kind of took in wrestling and the direction of the company. We don't know who will be that next guy. At the moment, we're being forced to be Roman Reigns, but there's no way Cena's going anywhere yet. Anyway, Superman will probably be ready for WrestleMania if you hear everything you read. And I kind of get the feeling he may be Shane McMahon's replacement. I really hope he's not, but that kind of thing, I think that kind of could happen. But yeah, I agree with you on Austin. Although I was more of a Rock fan, and at the time on the WCW side of the Monday Night Wars, as a wrestling fan, you can't not appreciate how brilliant Stone Cold was.
So let's talk about John Cena, man, because you know what, Ash, I have no problem with John Cena whatsoever. I think in a way I feel sorry for him because, again, he had the cool Golden Boy syndrome. I know that he's I think he's learnt his craft, though, because he really didn't have that many move sets and that many moves, but I think he's learnt a few more now. He even jokes about it on Steve's podcast. And what are your thoughts on John Cena, Ash?
I'm with you. I think the biggest problem with John Cena is that for a period of time he got a little bit stale. I think that was the paper, the promos were the same thing. He does pander to the kids, obviously, but that's his demographic. The kids absolutely love him. You go to any live WWE show and you count how many kids are wearing John Cena shirts. Even now, even when he's probably, a peak of his popularity may have been of a year, 18 months ago, but even now, they're just Cena shirts. They are completely.
I wouldn't want to. Also, Ash, I just wouldn't want to deny the kids that, because I've been to loads of the WWE live events, and I'm sitting there. I mean, I'm not ringside. I can't afford that, and nor can I get the tickets for that. But I'm there, and I can see a sea of John Cena shirts, and just in their eyes, you can see how much they love the show. And it also makes me think of a kid, adoring like Hulk Hogan or the Warrior back in my day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why would you want to? Like, people say John Cena should turn heel. To me, it's not about that. It's about the love he has for the wrestling and the love he has for the kids as well.
Yeah, and you see what he does outside the ring, the Make-A-Wish stuff.
Yeah.
But even besides that, he's an absolutely brilliant worker. The US Open Challenge he's done over the last year is brilliant. The matches he had with kind of guys like Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, he's still putting guys over, and he still makes 5-star matches. And the ratings speak for themselves in America. If John Cena's on the show, it spikes completely. The guy is money. The guy is he's WWE's man. I've got no problem with him whatsoever. I think it's brilliant the way he treats the chants as part of his old act. I think that's brilliant. He's taken it on the chin and just made it what it is. A lot of other guys would crumble in getting those sort of reactions that he got, especially kind of in the early days when it first really started. But now people want him back. We're looking at WrestleMania time and everyone's going, well, it'd be brilliant if Cena was back. Yeah, kind of 6 months ago, they were like, oh, Cena's out for 6 months, brilliant. Yeah, we can boo him, blah, blah, blah. But now they want him back because he is WWE, and he will...
All these people that say they don't want John Cena in the WWE, we'll see how they react when he comes back,
Yeah, he'll get a humongous pop, and rightfully he should. He deserves everything he's done. He is 24/7 WWE, and he's been on top now for more than a decade, and that's more than Hogan was. That was more than Stone Cold was, and he's done it brilliantly. And his early character with the rapping guy was really funny, really brilliant. And yes, it's evolved to be this happy-go-lucky. Would I like to see him be a bit more angry sometimes? Yes, of course. But we can't all have the perfect John Cena. He appealed to so many demographics. He's there for that audience, and he does a stellar job in doing it. And when you're talking big matches over the last kind of 5 years, John Cena is in every single one of them. The feud with The Rock over 2 WrestleManias, I love those. Because when they got in the ring and it was WrestleMania, everyone was on the edge of their seats. Regardless, we kind of knew the outcomes, especially the second one, but everyone was in their seats for those because they were brilliant matches and big matches. And turning him heel would be kind of redundant now. The time to do it was kind of that time when he was first fighting The Rock. It kind of wouldn't make a difference now because I think it'd actually be worse for him. He doesn't need to be a heel. He really doesn't. And I think I hope he comes back and continues kind of the US challenge, putting guys over. He's not been world champion for nearly 2 years now, so he doesn't need to be in that title picture, and I don't think he will be for the foreseeable future. I've got no problem with the man.
I think that for as much as the things that the WWE does wrong, I think it does something massively right in NXT. I don't know if you watch NXT, but I absolutely adore NXT. I can't get enough of it. Some of the matches involved in it are brilliant. I love watching the youngsters and their development. And what do you think of NXT, Ash?
Yeah, big fan. I think what they've done very well is they've catered for the big pure wrestling fan, haven't they? Really,
exactly.
That's what NXT is. If you want more wrestling, less storylines, and less kind of backstage skits, and obviously they've only got an hour to play with as well. You watch NXT, and some of the matches they've put on over the last kind of 18 months have been probably matches of the year contenders. You talk about last summer and Bayley and Sasha Banks. They've been in that, for a women's.
I was going to say shout out to the women's matches.
Yeah, because
and amazing.
To Triple H for being kind of the guy behind that and driving that forward, because it's produced some stellar matches, and the only problem they do have, which we've seen, is the kind of transition to the main roster, because at the moment you're kind of looking 50-50. You know, the Shield guys, obviously we've talked about. Kevin Owens is doing some great stuff, but then there's people kind of like Tyler Breeze, who was in NXT for a long time and looks already kind of a forgotten man in WWE. Adam Rose, who's kind of now in whatever the social outcasts are. They have to be careful that some of the gigs that work in the small arenas don't really cross over to a more mainstream audience and bigger arenas, which I think they found with Adam Rose. I'll be interested to see what happens with Enzo and Cass, actually, because I think their gimmick's brilliant.
I love Enzo and Cass
on NXT, and
SAWFT source.
Yeah, exactly. And I really hope, because I think they're on the verge of getting called up, and I really hope that kind of transition happens for them, because I think they've got it, and I think they'll inject something new into the tag team as well. I think them and New Day would be absolutely hilarious. So yeah, NXT. I mean, I'm a big fan of Finn Balor. I saw Finn Balor over here many times when he was Fergal Devitt. A great athlete and a unique character. Love seeing Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe looks like a different guy to the person you saw in TNA for the past 18 months. Bayley again, you know, we mentioned she's been brilliant as well. So yeah, there's some big talent there. Apollo Creed, obviously another one who's been doing some great stuff. A big guy there. I think he'll get a call up soon as well. Yeah, it's. I mean, I missed the shows in London at the end of the year, so I'm hoping to go to the next ones when they come over, because it's different experience. And it'd be interesting to see if this brand extension happens where NXT possibly plays a role in that, where they keep it separate, or they start to maybe make SmackDown a home where they could kind of transition them more kindly than Raw. But it's all up in the air. It's all conjecture and rumour at the moment.
Ash, let me tell you, man, it has been an absolutely amazing chat. I knew that it would be. I knew from the moment that we kind of connected. We've connected even more now, so I'm hoping that somewhere down the line we can do this again, man.
Yeah, well, you have to come on the AK90s podcast and talk about Norwich. We'll have to do this at some point. We'll have to find a date, and we'll book you in for that one, because we'd love to be talking Norwich and early 90s memories, but it's good. Always, I could chat wrestling as well all day, so we haven't even mentioned Adam Bomb, who was one of my favourites as well growing up. Random 90s wrestler there.
And Duke the Dumpster Druzy as well.
Yeah, that era was brilliant. And, you know, I could talk about WCW all day as well, because I was a big fan of that back in the day. So, if we ever...
Oz.
Oh, God, yeah. Maybe after that time, though. More NWO and the Artist. And, what was the guy with the Kiss, the Demon, the Kiss gimmick? Oh, that was terrible. I
tell you who I did love. You talk about... I don't think I answered that one, but we were talking about favourites, and you mentioned your WCW favourite being Sting. I absolutely love Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner.
Oh, yeah. Big Papa. I mean, you couldn't ever trust him with a mic, but that made it all better, because, you know, I remember kind of getting back into WCW when it started airing on TNT, as it used to be here in the UK, and seeing Scott Steiner and the transfer, because I kind of went a couple of years without seeing what happened in WCW, and then to see what had, you know, how beefed up he'd become, and the blonde hair and the shades and the, you know, holler if you hear me, great character, he was brilliant as well in his little WWE run. I thought he was really good.
I met Scott Steiner at a TNA event a few years ago, and he was sitting there. He had these dark glasses on, and I was just in awe of the man. And I didn't you know when you meet someone and you really have no idea what to say.
Yeah.
So I just got on my knees and I pointed straight at him and I said, "Scott, you're a legend." And he just looked at me and he just went, "Thank you, sir. Thank you."
I really hope he is like he is. You see him, because, you know, I always say the best wrestling gimmicks are kind of themselves just turned up 10. But I imagine Scott Steiner's been turned up a little bit, because he's already like that. I really hope so, because he just is what he is. He's a one-off Scott Steiner. Yeah, I'd like to see him back. I think he's still. I mean, I know you can't trust him with a mic, but he still offers some kind of different type of character. But yeah, I used to love the Steiner brothers as well. They were a great tag team.
Amazing tag team. Ash, we need to sign this off, but thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much, Carl, mate. It's been brilliant.
That has been Ash Rose. I've been Carl Eggett, and hopefully that'll be a part 2 as well to our conversation. Because
sounds good to me. Yeah.
Like Carlo. Thanks so much, Ash.
You've been listening to MNC. All views and opinions expressed by Carlo are all his own and do not represent any other entity.
Indeed.